two back-to-back developments that could push a region already on edge closer to the brink. First, the assassination of the political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. We're hearing reaction and condemnation from countries across the Middle East and indeed the world. Hamas says he was killed in Tehran on Tuesday after meeting with Iran's newly elected president, which you see here, and attending his inauguration. Iran state media say an airborne guided projectile was used to hit the building where Haniyeh was staying in the Iranian capital. Hamas was quick to blame Israel, calling it a Zionist strike. Israel says it doesn't respond to reports in the foreign media. Haniyeh has been part of Hamas for decades and was a key figure in the stalled ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas. Former Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, posting on X, says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing the region and the world to the brink of catastrophe. CNN's Nick Payne-Walsh, Tamara Cratchit, both here with me now. Nick, first of all, just explain what a key figure Haniyeh was and what we know about the attack.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is one of the leading, moderate, most recognisable faces of Hamas and somebody essentially deeply involved in all the negotiations that have been happening for months. That the US have invested so much political capital on the global stage and diplomatically over as well. What we know about this attack is pretty limited at this stage. We know an explosion occurred at about 2 o'clock in the morning in northern Tehran. It appears to be that only Haniyeh and his bodyguards were killed by this blast. That would suggest something that was pretty precise, pretty targeted, maybe quite limited. And the phrasing being used by Iranian state media here is a guided airborne projectile, which frankly could be anything. That might suggest it's less likely to be an Israeli jet firing a missile, but we still have so many holes in explaining how this extraordinary violation of Iranian security even occurred. And of course, it's 24 hours after the inauguration that Haniyeh was attending. It's a challenge to the comparatively moderate new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, and it's also clearly a direct challenge to the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. He's said that Israel will face harsh punishment for attacking what he referred to as a guest in Iran's house. I'm paraphrasing there, but we're into a dark and very hard to fathom chapter here. The southern Beirut attack against Hezbollah left many deeply concerned. We could see a conflagration along the northern Israeli-Lebanese border, but now we have a whole extra thought to have about quite how Iran, Hezbollah's key backer, respond to this extraordinary violation of their sovereignty.
I mean, they'll feel insulted, they'll feel violated. This was sovereign soil.
Quite an embarrassment for the Iranians, as Nick was saying. Their intelligence and their security apparatus, something like this happening on Iranian soil, very embarrassing. And this is why you are bound to see the Iranians responding somehow. But as Nick was saying, how, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it is certainly something that has put the entire region yet again on edge. I mean, this has just been a very, very dangerous 24 hours in the region.
Because there's been two together. If it was just one, it would be less concerning. They came together. Is that, how would you describe the...
There are some in the region who are seeing this as provocations and an attempt by the Israelis to push for some sort of retaliation, some sort of an escalation happening within 24 hours, when you have these two targeted killings taking place in Beirut and in Tehran, especially really in Tehran. Their feeling is that this is pushing the Iranians, their proxies in the region, to some sort of a response. What that is, we're all waiting to see.
And we keep hearing that no one wants a war. Iran doesn't want a war. So how do they respond? By making their point and asserting themselves in this incident, but not escalating to the extent where we're now in a war.
Nobody wants a war, really, because it would be catastrophic for everybody involved. The US doesn't want it ahead of an election, messing up their foreign policy. Israel probably is overstretched after its long war in Gaza and is facing in Hezbollah an enemy with a phenomenal rocket arsenal that could do significant damage to their population centres. Lebanon does not want the spectre of Israeli airstrikes over its key cities like Beirut, where Hezbollah has a stronghold. And Iran, look, you know, they try and walk 10 foot tall the whole time. And you heard the fiery rhetoric from the supreme leader today, but they're suffering from sanctions. They've just had years of unrest. Now there's a more moderate president in power than Khamenei, frankly, would probably have liked to have seen. So none of them really want it, but none of them can afford at this point to lose face, particularly Iran, after something like this. But it's important to look at the two events of the last 24 hours in sort of slight separation. They're completely connected in what will happen afterwards, but the strike on southern Beirut, you could argue, was a targeted Israeli response for what happened in the Golan Heights over the weekend, the killing of predominantly teenagers playing football who were Druze. We knew there would be an Israeli response, and they went a little bit further, I think, than anybody might have expected by hitting southern Beirut, but after that, you might consider a tit-for-tat had occurred. This extra assassination of Haniyeh, fully within what Israel has always said it would do. They've always said they go after Hamas leadership. Did they say they'd go into northern Tehran and carry out an attack like this? Well, they've done it before, frankly, with nuclear scientists in 2020. And so a lot of questions as to what Iran is actually going to be able to do next and what's within its sort of pain threshold. And a lot of this would have been factored in by the Israelis before they even launched an attack like this. But there's a key question, and that's really US involvement here. Secretary Blinken has said that they were not aware, they were not involved in this attack. It beggars belief to me, frankly, that there'd be no heads up to the United States of a move like this.
It would be a courtesy, wouldn't it?
I mean, yeah, 5 minutes beforehand. But we simply don't know the full extent, and I'm sure Secretary Blinken is telling the absolute truth here. But if this means that a key move like this was made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu without telling the United States, then where is that relationship now? What traction does the Biden administration even have after his recent visit to Washington?
And what does it do next? Where does, the role of US diplomacy right now to try and de-escalate this situation, right?
I want to ask you about the peace process, because Qatar made an interesting comment, which was how can, these negotiations continue? Qatar's obviously hosting them if one of the key negotiators has been assassinated, effectively.
I mean, it's a very strong statement coming from
Haniyeh was, right?
Key player in these negotiations, of course, that have been, they've stalled over the past few months, but they have been ongoing and quite delicate talks at this point in time for the release of the hostages for a ceasefire deal in Gaza. And there are critics of the Israeli Prime Minister who have accused him time and time again of attempts at sabotaging these talks because they've always felt that it is in his interest to prolong any war. The wars that are going on to stay in office, it's all about his political survival, really, as many have seen it. So you've had this very strong statement coming from the Qataris, the Prime Minister posting on X saying that the approach of political assassination does prompt the question of how can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side. So really big questions about what happens next, but clearly at this point in time, it's very hard to imagine that these talks are going to resume anytime soon.
Extraordinary to hear Secretary Blinken this morning talking about how the ceasefire is the goal, almost as though this extraordinary move by the Israelis to kill one of the negotiators they've been talking with for months, that hasn't somehow disrupted the process. And so there is
on hold at the very least, right?
I think you can say a few days people aren't going to be picking up their phones, but particularly one of them. But I mean, we're in a horrific moment here, I think, where the concept of US traction slipping is there as we reach this very dangerous moment of unpredictability.
A lot of people asking a question about the timing. Why now?
Yeah.
Why now? Yeah. Well, what's the theory?
It's a question for the
why now, so close to the Beirut strike?
No, why now? Like, why go after Haniyeh right now when there was a feeling that these talks are back on track, when they are getting closer, why is it happening? Why did the Israelis choose to go after Haniyeh right now?
And they created the risk of a more hardline leader coming in to replace him, presumably.
I mean, ultimately, you will find a place down the line where Hamas and Israel end up having to speak to each other again, or some way of solving the horrors of what's happening in Gaza now goes back to the negotiating table. And we simply don't know how well it was going inside those closed doors. But this certainly means that any progress is out the window for a significant period of time. But there are so many other calculations here that I'm sure are being taken behind closed doors that we're not aware of. Doesn't mean that they're good or that they're wise, but it does inform what happens next.
Nick, Jemana, thank you both very much indeed.